Well, it's like a real-life Matrix. Cyber wars and cybersecurity are no longer fictional plots for movies. They are serious concerns getting tracked by politicians in Washington. Joining me now to shed light on these cyber wars is investigative journalist and author Webster Tarpley. Webster, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to talk about Google and China. We just were discussing it with our correspondent Lauren Lister before. You know, Google said that it would stay in China only if the Chinese government lifted the censorship issue. But, you know, nothing has changed. Google is still there. What's really going on here?
We have to admire the virtuosity of House Foreign Relations Committee under Howie Berman, because last week they were able to decide an issue in the history of the Ottoman Empire, and this week they're back legislating the proper internet policy for China. I think it's clear Google will have to obey Chinese law or they'll be out. Microsoft is already signaling that they are much more anxious to stay than Google. And when we say Google, we should realize that they're now in a cartel with the National Security Agency, the NSA, and therefore are functioning as an arm of the U.S. intelligence community. The U.S. is trying to go to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, with a complaint against China. So I think there's nothing coming there but conflict. But there are two sides to Google. One is the censorship issue. The other side is the hacking, the cyber warfare, as you point out. And I think here is where we have some really ominous stuff going on. Here in the U.S., we've had a buildup now over months, going back to a statement by Obama last May, where he said that his website had been hacked during the campaign. So he was a victim of these things. So there's been a buildup on it. And recently we've had a special report on CNN, a simulation of a cyber attack on the U.S., and we've had a very important op-ed in the Washington Post by a guy called Mike McConnell, who was the head of the NSA under Clinton, and he now works for Booz Allen Hamilton. And essentially what you have in this is everything is shut down when the cyber attack occurs, and Admiral McConnell says, we've got to fight the cyber war the way we fought the Cold War. So let me just, if I could, point out a couple of tendencies that are going on. One of the things that's happening here is a vast exaggeration of what you can do with a computer, right? It seems to be they want you to believe you can shut down power plants, you can blow up nuclear reactors, you can stop trains and planes from taking off. There are no really recorded cases of this. You have people hacking into banks and things like this, but not anything more. It's the CIA and the Wall Street Journal that want you to think that there are these threats. So it sounds a little bit like Saddam can strike London in 45 minutes or something like that. The other thing we're doing is taking the language and the logic of the Cold War, and indeed of nuclear confrontation, and bringing that into this new cyber field. So we're talking about deterrence, retaliation, first strike, all of this stuff that we thought we were rid of.
So why then would there be this exaggeration? You know, in the recent article that I pointed out just a few minutes ago in the London Times, NATO diplomats were saying there is a cyber war going on between China and the United States, and you seem to say that maybe this is just the ongoing finger pointing that's happening between China and the U.S. I mean, what's really happening here?
It's something more. It's much more ominous because it's the preparation for a whole new field of conflict on the part of people whose interest is conflict. They make money off of it. They've made their careers off of it. It also is their ideology. With cyber warfare, you get a whole new cast of enemies. In the CNN simulation, Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda came up, and they were essentially scorned. They said, oh, they can't do it. Those guys live in caves. So who can do it? CNN says Russia, China, Sudan. So now you're playing in a much bigger league than just the Middle East. The other thing is, suppose you have a digital Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or something that's being sold as that. I think you get into an issue which I would call virtual flag terrorism. In other words, false flag terrorism, provocations take place, they're blamed on somebody. In the area of virtual flag terrorism, something happens, you can blame anything on anybody. If we have a crash in the DC metro, what to do? Blame a hacker in Russia or China or Sudan. And who in the world is going to be able to say no? Especially when we have these groups like Net Witness, which seems to be the watchdog of this, which is itself an arm of the CIA and the U.S. intelligence community. So it looks to me like we're heading into an area. Plus, you can also put provocateurs on somebody's territory, I mean physical provocateurs, and they do it. Or you have a botnet, you have Trojans that are controlling computers in some other country, and you blame them. So location and attribution are not the same thing, but some people would say, no, location is attribution. We make no distinction. Let's attack.
Webster, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And we're certainly venturing into different turf now with these cyber war attacks.